All right. Well, welcome to the Band of Brothers podcast. I'm H.R. Brown, and I'm here today with Keith H. I won't use your last name unless you want me to. Thanks for
You,
joining us, Keith. We appreciate it.
you can use my last name. It's Hansen.
Okay, Keith Hansen. Thanks for being on, man. We appreciate your willingness to share your story with other guys and gals out there in recovery. So, welcome. Let's just start at the beginning. Like, when was the first time? How old were you when you first tried a mind altering substance? Do you remember?
Yeah, I do. It's interesting. I've thought about this over the years, and so my drug of choice when I got into my active addiction later on was opiates, painkillers, and other pharmaceuticals. And as a child, I had various surgeries on my left ear and a broken arm and things, and I don't ever remember feeling a euphoric high from any of that until the first time I remember in what I would say recreational use was for alcohol. The first time I think I was 16, and
Mhm.
that alcohol and drugs, not so much drugs, but alcohol had been intriguing to me, but I'd never dabbled with anything like that. And I was 16 and was hanging out with some older guys that had graduated high school and had their own place in Provo. And we went up there
You
one
grew up
night.
in Utah then.
Yeah, I grew up in Fairview, Utah, down in Sanpete County, a
Fairly.
little
Yeah.
small town.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and they were drinking the night that we were there, and I saw others having a good time, and I was always pretty reserved, and I wanted to see what that was all about. And I
Mhm.
remember I was trying to drink beer and I couldn't stand the taste of it. And I was holding up a washcloth under my chin as I'm choking down this beer just because I wanted to see what the effect would be. And I just remember my inhibitions left, and I was like, wow, this is now I see why people do this. And that was kind of a one-time thing for a while. And then into my senior year of high school, which would have been that probably that following summer, is when I started, just drinking with friends on the weekends. My one of my good friends
Well, how
growing
old
up,
were you when you had that first drink? You were 16, you said?
16, I think. Yeah,
Yeah.
probably. Yeah,
So,
16.
so did you do it again shortly thereafter, or what
I
happened?
don't remember how long after. It was probably weeks or months. But that following summer, it became pretty regular. And going into my senior year of high school, one of my good friends, his dad was the town cop, and he had a farm out west of town, and we would actually go party on his farmland, and he knew it. He would just tell us, don't let anybody smoke the happy stuff, and close the
Mhm.
gate so nobody drives drunk. But he would let us go party on his farm, and so we would do that. We would go up in the mountains and camp and just drink around the campfire. So it was not never during the week. It was just a weekend with friends type thing for quite a while. But I
Mhm.
remember the first time feeling that opiate high, that painkiller high that later on became my drug of choice. It was in my senior year of high school, and some it wasn't even like a close friend, a random acquaintance in between classes one day handed me a pain pill. It was probably a Lortab or something, and ironically, I was on my way to my LDS seminary class when I took it, and I remember when that hit specifically, which is weird because, like I said, I'm sure when I was younger, I was on painkillers after surgeries and stuff, but I don't ever remember that euphoria that came with that one. And I was just sitting there, and it was just, I don't know how to explain it other than just that warm fuzzy feeling that comes with that. And
You
so
get kind of the
yeah, like, oh, there it is. Like what
yeah,
is that? How do I get more of this?
yeah.
Um, but that was kind of a one-off deal as well. I remember when I got my wisdom teeth out, using painkillers, and taking them until they were gone for sure. And my mom, not letting me get the refill. So I do remember that. and so the party lifestyle kind of intrigued me, so I got involved with that. Again, just drinking. I was never around hard drugs, and I even marijuana wasn't anything that I was around. But we drank a lot of beer and had a lot of late night campfire times. And then so that was going out my last year of high school, and then started college at Snow College. And didn't do well that first semester because I was screwing around, and so then I decided, well, I'm going to work and for a while and go on a mission. So I decided to clean up and go on an LDS mission, which I did. Even up until probably 2 months before leaving on my mission, though, I was still drinking and smoking cigarettes. And I remember I had a bishop that was a convert to the church, and just he had, I think, lived that lifestyle when he was younger, and
Right.
I was struggling to quit smoking before I left on my mission, and I remember him telling me, he's like, you could have a cigarette on the way to the MTC as far as God's concerned, but I wouldn't recommend that because then you would be going into nicotine withdrawals as a missionary. And so I was
Yeah.
able to give up smoking and drinking and went on an LDS mission, and what I would consider a successful experience in my life, and came home,
Where did you go?
Riverside, California. So
Nice. Okay.
down through Riverside,
What
Menifee.
years were you there?
That would have been 2002 to 2004. So
Okay. So how old are you?
I was I went on my mission at 19, so I came
Oh,
home at 21 in 2004.
okay. So did you know Clint Maurer?
Clint Maurer, I don't think so.
Anyway,
No.
good friend of mine right around your age. He served there as well. Anyway,
Yeah, no, it doesn't
so
ring a
you
bell.
get back and what happens?
So I get back. I started work. I got back in September, and I was going to start school in January again, and um, started working for a roofing company, just doing construction. Um, I don't know how many months I had been back. I stayed active in the church for a while, and then probably 5, 6 months off the mission, I hung out with some old friends and drank for the first time again,
Okay.
and just slowly kind of fell away from the church and started drinking, just socially again. It wasn't ever drinking was never an everyday thing until these last 2 years of my addiction that I'll get to.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, kind of just fell away from religion, started partying again, and um,
So do you remember the first time you drank so you hadn't drank or used anything for 2.5 years roughly, huh?
yeah,
What
yeah,
was
never even.
what was the mindset when you, because I'm sure there's a level of having to talk yourself into it, of rationalization, justification, like what do you remember what you went through to be able to finally just grab that drink and take it?
I don't remember really what was going on at the time. I remember starting to hang out with some friends again that drank. They were a few years older than me. And there was never any pressure or anything like that. It was totally my choice. It wasn't, I didn't like give in to pressure or anything. It was just, yeah, I don't know. That was 20 years ago. I don't remember what led up to it or even how frequently it became after that. I did a semester at Utah Valley in Orem, and then I decided I wanted to go into nursing. So I moved down here to St. George. I got accepted to Dixie, and I got back into painkillers. I was working with one of the guys that I roofed with. We started doing rain gutter and soffit and siding, and he came down here to St. George, and we were doing some work down here while I was going to school. And his dad was a veteran, and he would just get loads of painkillers in the mail, and so my buddy would skim some off the top from him, and from then until I got into being a nurse, doing opiates, painkillers was always just like if they were there, I would do them. It wasn't I never sought to buy them off the street or anything like that. But if someone had a painkiller, I was all about it. And my dad dealt with some back pain for a long time, so I would,
Okay.
skim some off of his prescriptions. And um, I don't even know how I got to that point where that was okay, but I just did it.
Yeah.
Um, and so the painkillers, they would be on and off depending on who had them. And then when I got accepted in nursing school and moved in with a couple of guys who drank, and so then I started drinking pretty regularly with them throughout the rest of my college days.
Hmm.
Um, but I wouldn't say I did it. It was never a daily thing, but I would say I always drank alcoholically. Like I drank to get drunk. I never drank to sit down and enjoy the taste of beer, like or anything like that. It was always doing it to change the way I feel. I
What were you changing? Like what emotions do you think that you were uh, hiding or medicating or guising?
Growing up, I was never really comfortable in my own skin. It would take me a while to warm up to people and situations. I didn't grow up with any like trauma or abuse or anything other than just like the trauma of going through some surgeries as a child. But I don't know how else to explain it other than I just was never comfortable in my own skin. And
Okay.
when I would drink or use it, just all of that was gone. Like I felt alive, felt normal, quote unquote. And I would use it. I would use in excess when I would use at that point. Um,
Okay. So let's fast forward. You're at Dixie. You're going to nursing school.
yeah, I got through nursing school. I've been blessed. I always did well in school. School was never a challenge for me. Got through nursing school. I was living in St. George, and when I was finishing my last year of nursing school, I got a job in Mesquite at a nursing home and met my wife there, or my future wife. And so then I ended up moving to Mesquite after nursing school. And I wasn't a nurse very long when I first figured out I could kind of screw the system and get drugs from work. And so then it wasn't very long after that that it became a regular daily habit. And so this would have been 2010 probably, 2009, 2010. And then I became addicted to painkillers and regularly, I was 3 to 4 times a day. I would take my pills with breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and sometimes bedtime if I had them.
How
And
were you
then,
getting them? What were you buying them off the street at this point, or did you have somebody writing you bad scripts, or what were you doing?
no, I would there'd be patients that wouldn't use their own prescription, and I would sign them out like I gave them to them, and then I would take them home with me. So. And that became a regular occurrence. I don't know how I didn't get caught before I did because painkillers are controlled substances, and so you would have to sign them. At the facility I worked at, it was just a paper log that you would sign out that you gave the medication. And I don't know how people didn't notice before they did because my signature was on there a hell of a lot more than anybody else's. And but somehow I managed to get away with that for almost 2 years. And then in the meantime, I had started working home health and was taking medications from patients as well. And had a patient that figured out she was missing a lot more than she should have been missing, a bottle of painkillers,
Okay.
and reported me to my boss.
Let's
Uh,
back up before that. What's going on with your wife? Is she aware? Are you underground with all this, or is she aware that something's going on?
Initially, she wasn't aware. We hadn't been together very long and this just baffles my mind to this day when I think about this because this was a time of my life when like instead of spiraling up with all the blessings that were coming my way, I that wasn't good enough for me. I had never had a long-term girlfriend growing up. I was always pretty closed off to that, and just didn't think I was attractive to women, and wasn't very outgoing to pursue that. And I just graduated nursing school. I had a degree, I had a good job, and then I finally met my future wife. And one would think on the outside like that, this is what you've worked for, this is what you've wanted. You're blessed with someone that truly loves you for who you are. And in that same time frame is when I figured out I could be on opiates every day. And the only way I can describe it is that, instead of spiraling up with those blessings, I dove in because that wasn't good enough. I wanted to feel even better, so to speak, on
Mhm.
a regular basis. And then things just took off from there. And she didn't know for a long time, and because we weren't married at the time, we got married in 2011, and it was the beginning of 2012 when I got reported by a patient to my employer. And
So
so,
you were working for a home health care, you said?
yeah, yeah,
Okay. And you started, someone noticed you'd been popping some pills out.
yeah. Yeah, and the owners of that company, the one is, or two of them are physical therapists, and so the one boss was the physical therapist for this patient, and she had reported me to him. And so I got confronted and initially denied it, like, oh no, and then they drug tested me, and so then the next morning before the test came back, I confessed that I had an issue, and they allowed me to report myself to the nursing board, which I did. And so then I went under contract with the state nursing board and temporarily surrendered my nursing license, and was able to go under contract with them. And so that meant I needed to go through treatment, get involved in AA, go to aftercare meetings. They had a whole list of things that you do to be able to get your license back. And so
So
I did.
what year is this now?
This is the beginning of 2012.
Okay. So you're like 30, 31, 32, something like that?
Yeah, I would have been. I was
Okay.
born in 83, so 2029. Yeah, 30.
How did that go?
Initially, it went really well. I went to it's called Monte Vista Hospital in Vegas at the time. I think it's called something else, but I went to
Mhm.
their chemical dependency unit to detox, and then got into their day treatment program. So I was driving back and forth to Vegas from Mesquite every day for treatment. And then there was a nurses support group meeting. So every week I would meet with other nurses that were in the same situation. Went to an aftercare meeting every week through that same place. And the aftercare meeting was really cool. It was a lot of other professionals, a lot of pilots and attorneys and some doctors and a lot of nurses. There's a lot of us nurses that get into that diversion game. And I really, in my own way, the night before I surrendered my nursing license, I remember I called my dad and told him they had no idea what I was up to. But I told him, and my dad was just a simple-minded, just a good old small town Utah guy. And I just told him what was going on. And he told me, well, let's fix this and get up the road, basically. And I think I took that too literal looking back on it now, because I looked at, like, let me get the drugs out of my life and then move, get back to life. And I never really did. I let my ego creep back in. I never really did the work on myself as to why I drank and used. And so I was able to stay sober for over 6 years. I got involved with AA, and initially I got a sponsor. But I think I only
What
made,
did your wife think when you got caught?
she was devastated. But she's just
What completely surprised her that you were using
no, she
anything, or that?
she she knew she didn't know the depth of it, but she
Yeah.
knew it was a full-blown addict at that point. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And she's originally from Mexico, and she's just to put your nose to the grindstone and figure things out when life happens, basically. And now 12 years later, she's still doing it, as I've obviously didn't stay sober and get my act together. But thankfully somehow she still lets me come home at night. So
That's awesome. So
yeah.
you were doing AA, you were sponsor, going to meetings, and what happened?
Yeah, the meetings, I did 90 and 90, which was required by the program, and then I got a sponsor. And I remember getting to step three, and I think we started step four, and I don't know, life was just kind of humming along, and I still did all the requirements as far as the nurses support group meeting, and but I got back to my old devious ways because I would just forge the meeting slips, like saying I was going to meetings, but not going to meetings. I
Mhm.
went consistently for the first year probably, and then after that, I just got complacent and thought I was doing okay and getting back to life. For a while, while I didn't have my nursing license, I was commuting up to Fairview to work for my dad. He was a contractor, and so I would go up and stay with him every week.
So
And
did you have your license back at this point?
no, I didn't have my license for about 6 months. That was January of 2012. I got my license reinstated in I think July or August of that year,
Okay.
but with restrictions. And most places don't like to hire nurses in that situation. So it took me another 8 or 9 months to find a job as a nurse again.
Yeah.
But I did find a job in Las Vegas at a hospital and worked there for about 3.5 years. And but yeah, somewhere in that 1 to 2 year range is when I was just all lip service. Like I would go to the required, I would do my drug test for the nursing board and go to the meetings that I couldn't get away with not going to. But I never did any work on myself. And 2015, we were blessed with our second daughter. I have two daughters. Um, I was working as a nurse again, just being that provider. And beginning of 2017, I was able to get my old job back through that home health company. The employers, my wife still works for that same company. They're just amazing people. They gave me a chance to come back and work for them again.
Wow.
And I did well. I stayed sober through the end of my contract with the nursing board, which ended up being about 5.5 years.
Okay.
But it wasn't very
So
long
those
after.
diversion programs work.
What's that?
Those diversion programs work. I mean, when
Yeah,
you
I
have a
remember
license
them.
like that and you're in danger of losing something you've worked hard for educationally and in the field, those work.
Yeah, the Nevada one, which I was in, I mean, I'm obviously on the other part of the statistics, but they said they had over an 80% success rate with nurses staying sober for, I don't know how they tracked that, but
Yeah.
so I was able to stay sober when I had them hanging above my head.
That's what I think their 80% is.
Yeah.
until you're not gonna, you're not on the program anymore if you're yeah. So what happened? You get off 5.5 years, you get off diversion, you get off that program, and how did you notice you stopped doing certain things, or you started taking shortcuts, or
Well, at that point, I wasn't in recovery. I think there's a big difference. I now understand there's a huge difference between sober and being in recovery. And I don't think I was truly in recovery after the first few months of 2012. I was dry, but I was s- still pretty miserable and still pretty cynical about life.
yeah?
And so once that accountability was off and I wasn't checking in to see if I had a drug test every day, I don't know if I lasted more than a few weeks before I took my first drink. And then
So were
for
you going um, back to your church at that point through those 5.5 years, or what was your
no, when my wife and I first got together and moved into our first home, we went to church a few times. There's a really good bishop that was supportive. My wife's not a member of the church. She was raised Catholic. But she would go with us, and we went for a little while. And at this point, I'll probably just say the ward wasn't that accepting, and I just use that as an excuse not to keep going.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm not active in the church to this day. I don't know if I'll find my way back to it at some point, but most of my family is, but it's not something that I've found my way back even this time. But
Yeah. I was just curious. It's not, yeah.
yeah, and in fact, this last time, well, so I started drinking on the weekends pretty regularly there for a few months, and then it was even after work. I would sneak a few drinks. I would take the side by side out in the desert and pound a couple drinks, and get a little buzz on and come back home for the evening.
Well, let me
And
back up if I can. Like,
yeah,
so again, to what did you go through in your head to after 5.5 years to take that first drink? What do you remember some of the things that were going on or what you were rationalizing or how you got to that point where it's like, okay, that's cool, I'm going.
yeah, my biggest rationalization was alcohol wasn't ever my issue in my eyes. It was I never drank on a regular basis, so to
Okay.
speak, and so then it's like, oh, I can have a few beers when we go to this party, or
Okay.
on a Saturday night after doing yard work or whatever the case was.
Okay.
And so I started drinking occasionally at first, and then pretty regularly. And then it would have been, I think, the beginning of like 2019. I was seeing a patient and was helping him get his medications situated, and there was like 5 gigantic bottles of Percocet, and I was just like, oh wow, this guy has no idea what he has, because
Yeah.
he would just get regular prescriptions and wouldn't take them. And he wasn't an addict, so he had plenty to spare in my eyes. And just like alcohol, it was like, oh, okay, I'll take this pill and then I'll take it on the weekend. And it wasn't very many months after that that it was a full-blown addiction every day. I would get sick if I didn't have them. And
And that's a pretty common cycle, I think. I've noticed it more with people that are on opioids, but it happens with meth too. Anybody that's really tied in to one really specific drug of choice, which a lot of people are, that it's always easy to rationalize back to something that's legal. Like I'll just have a beer. I never really had that much problem with beer. I can go to the liquor store. I don't have to find a dealer. I don't have to get somebody to prescribe. The path is easier back to that. Did you find that?
yeah, yeah. And at that point, I when I started drinking before I got back into pills, I had a lot of gratitude for being able to work for that company again. And in my own eyes at the time, I was making a living amends to them for basically going out on a bad note back in 2012. And so I didn't want to get to the point, morally and ethically, to stoop to that level again. And it was, I don't even know. I mean, I can justify anything, but I don't know what was going through my mind, like thinking this is okay again, especially after everything I'd been through, the hell that I put my family through, the sacrifice my wife made to help make ends meet when I wasn't working, all of that.
What do you feel like you were medicating? What emotions were you medicating on the relapse?
I don't know how to explain it other than just when I would use, everything was okay. Like no matter what was going on at home, no matter what in social circles, I was just more comfortable getting through my day when I was under the influence of something.
Right. A friend of mine a long time ago used to say he was chronically dissatisfied.
I can relate to that a lot.
that always rang with me like, yeah, yeah, that's kind of like, not, it's just nothing's never enough. This isn't enough, that isn't enough, and maybe I can find some satisfaction here. You know,
Yeah. And
What
that's
was your-
what it gave me. And then, with opiates or with anything, you just become a slave to that. Because for me, I didn't want to go through the physical withdrawal, because opiate withdrawal is not fun. But again, that's the power of it. I'd been through it years before, and that nothing like that stops you from doing it again if you haven't done the work.
Right. So how long did you run on this?
So I ran on that from 2019 to 2021. Um, and it
How were
was
you how were you getting your pills?
through work again.
Okay.
That's the only way I ever got opiates.
Okay.
I've never bought anything off the street or even tried to go seek that. It was just always filling my pockets when I would need them, and
Gotcha.
figuring out a way that way without going into too much detail.
So how did you hit your last bottom?
So my last bottom came with alcohol, but in the fall of 2020, I my wife knew what I was up to again, and she helped me get into a detox here in St. George. So I did like a 5-day detox and agreed to go to an outpatient program, and I and that was
Did you
a detox with Suboxone, and so I went home with Suboxone for a few days on a short taper, but I was only able to stay clean for not even days after that detox, and slowly got back into it again. Um, the beginning of 2021, my dad passed away, and then a couple weeks after that, I mean, I was using the whole time through this, but I think it was February of 2001, I went back to that same detox, um, got into another outpatient program, which I attended regularly, but struggled to stay sober. I would always have an excuse why I couldn't do UAs, and they were
Mhm.
pretty lenient. And so I went to that outpatient program that whole spring of 2021, and then um, August, I tried to get on Vivitrol, the Vivitrol shot, but I couldn't even stay sober a week to get on that. And then August of 2021, I was actually on my way home from IOP and wrecked my truck and got a DUI.
So
And
you were using through IOP.
yeah, yeah,
Gotcha. Okay.
yeah. And got a DUI in August of 2021. And then the following week, I finally got established with a doctor in St. George and got on Suboxone, and was able to get off the other opiates by being on Suboxone. And then later on that year, so this was the fall of 2021, I was just I thought I was getting burnt out on nursing. My dad had died earlier that year, and he managed a county landfill up in Utah, and the landfill was still under contract. And so I talked to my mom and said, "Hey, let me come and run the landfill for the last 2 years of the contract." And so the beginning of 2022, I quit nursing and went and did that for 2 years. But in the meantime, so
And
I
your
was
wife
off.
relocated with you.
No, I was just commuting every week. Yeah, from Mesquite, I would go and stay with my mom during the week and come home on the weekends.
Gotcha.
And so I didn't have access to my drugs anymore, and I was on Suboxone, and staying on that. But at some point, I figured out that they weren't testing for alcohol on the UAs through the clinic that I was getting that from. So
Okay.
I started drinking again, and then it wasn't very many weeks that that became a daily thing. And so I drank daily, every single night after work. And I would, when I was up working, and then on the weekends, I would just sneak it and be drunk most of the evenings at least, but a lot of times even during the day on the weekends. And
Hmm.
so I drank like that for about a year. And the summer of 23 last year, we were on a family trip in Mexico with my in-laws, and I had I don't remember blacking out from drinking a lot, but I blacked out one day. I don't even remember the night that happened after this, but I somehow was yelling at my older daughter in a restaurant, threw water on her. Like, I don't even remember any of this, or why I was mouthing off to my in-laws, mouthing off to my wife. So
Mm.
basically ruined what should have been a nice family vacation in Mexico, and come home from that and headed up to Fairview for the next day for the week. I had my younger daughter with me. Um, this was July of 2023, and I get up there that Monday and started drinking. And I was going back to my mom's because we were going to have dinner with her new boyfriend. And that afternoon, she told me that they were going to get married, and they'd only been together for a few weeks, and that just didn't sit right with me. So I went and drank some more,
Hmm.
came back to dinner, and got in an altercation with her and her boyfriend, and the cops were called, and I ended up spending a night in jail for threats of violence and or intoxication. And my daughter witnessed a lot of that. Thankfully, I have a sister that lives in town, and they took my daughter, and my wife drove up and got her and took her home. But then the next morning when I got out of jail, my wife told me that you're going to treatment, or you're at minimum you're going to lose me and probably your kids if you don't get help. So um, she, like she does, she went into action mode and got on the phone with, I have an aunt who went through Renaissance Ranch, the women's program a few years ago, or about a decade ago now, and she was able to get a hold of Brian Heaton and get me a bed at the ranch. And I went into residential treatment 3 days later, and I've been
She went
sober
up to
since.
Bluffdale.
Yeah, I went to Bluffdale. I was gonna go the place that I went to detox down here a couple of times. I was debating between here and there, and I don't know, the ranch just felt right. And now, I mean, it definitely was right for me because the Bluffdale Ranch is such a special place in my eyes. Like, um, I know you say the ranch doesn't save lives. We have to do the work to get sober and stay sober, but the ranch played a big part in saving my life and family and all kinds of things. So
Yeah.
yeah, once I got there, initially I thought I was going to just talk my way into doing some outpatient, and my wife's like, "No, you're going to residential." And so I I remember just feeling like, okay, let's go do this. And once I got there, I was taught to have a strong work ethic, and if I'm going to do something, I need to do it, try to do it right. And I approach my mission, I approach work, I approach a lot of things in life that way. And so once I was there, it's like, well, obviously my way's not working. Let me just try to be willing to do whatever they asked me to do. And I was able to do that and complete the 60-day program. And initially I only committed to 30 days. And I remember sitting in Brian Heaton's office and so, yeah, I think I'll do 30 days. And he's like, "Mm, okay, when you get to that 30-day mark, you might want to reevaluate." And so I got to the 30-day mark and decided I should probably stay. And so I was able to do that. And then I came home to Mesquite.
What do
And
you think? Back up a little. What do you think was your what was a turning point in your recovery and treatment? What? And I don't mean maybe with staff, but with other clients. Like what? Did you have an aha moment where it's like, okay,
yeah, there's two that definitely come to mind. And the first one, so prefacing this by in the in the last few years of my use, I said, I'd gotten away from religion quite a few years ago, but in the last 4 or 5 years of life, I became very cynical, even to the idea of God. And I would use excuses like, "Oh, how could a loving God, let kids die from cancer or have all these wars happening or what things that had nothing to do with me?" But I would use that as an excuse to. I would say I was borderline agnostic. Like I didn't even
right?
have
Prove
any
it, prove
relationship with
it,
a higher
right?
power whatsoever.
Yeah.
But I remember I went into treatment on a Thursday, and I remember that Sunday we went to the addiction fireside up there in Murray or wherever it is, and the opening song was "I Am a Child of God."
Mm.
And that just, something came over me, and I was like, okay, I'm where I'm supposed to be. And that was the first definite big turning point. And the second one was in my step one group. group, and I don't remember what I was talking about, but I remember Matt Piper, the counselor, was challenging me on something, and he was asking me how I felt about what I was talking about, and I was trying to think my way through what I was feeling. I didn't even know what I was feeling, and he would stop me and he would say, like, "No, what are you feeling? Don't tell me what you think you're feeling." And that was just one of those moments that I'm still working on that today, on learning how to feel.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was like, wow, I have a lot of work to do. I can't even identify what I'm feeling, and I know, something's not right.
Right. Right.
But I had a lot of good individual therapy sessions with Dave Callister, who I love. You know, there wasn't anything that was negative about being there. It was, my wife calls it my two month vacation, because she was home, holding down the fort, and
Yeah.
um, but it was just, I don't know, I just became willing to do what they asked, and even things like the yoga groups, and I just participated in everything I was supposed to do. And um, the Wednesday night alumni meetings, which I still love, I still Zoom into them every week. That was a big part of being there, seeing other guys doing the deal. And
So did you go to aftercare? Did you go to?
so I just did mine through Zoom, because I came home to Mesquite, and then I was still working for my mom, but even Fairview's an hour and a half from Bluffdale. So I would make it up to alumni in person, but most of my IOP was through Zoom.
Okay.
But yeah, I was able to complete that, earlier this year, back in March. And each time I've got sober or tried to get sober, I've always felt like I would like to work in recovery. And last fall around this time, I remember talking to my wife about that, and she's like, "Well, if you're serious about that, just try and go do it. Stop talking about it and go do it." And
I'm gonna meet your wife. I like her. She's
yeah, she's a fiery Latina, that's for sure. But I didn't know where the opportunity might present itself, and it was actually in one of my Zoom meetings with my recovery coach Steve that he opened the door to a conversation with Tyson Dixon. And initially I was going to just start as like a residential tech when the residential down here opens, and which is still not open. So I'm glad things worked out a different way, because I finished up working for my mom at the end of the year, and then I was out of work for a couple months, and it just happened that I was able to start working for the ranch in St. George as a recovery coach, which I'm still doing now, and going to be a part of helping open that residential when the time comes.
That's awesome. So what are you doing for your recovery every day? What do you do to stay sober every day?
So the biggest thing, when I hit my year mark in July, I just didn't feel very spiritually fit. Going into working in recovery, I remember even telling myself, like, just because I'm working in recovery, I can't neglect what I'm doing personally. But I did. I got complacent in my own program. When I wasn't working, I was going to meetings every single day, because it's like, I'm not working. I should probably at least be in a meeting. And started working with the sponsor there for a few months, and kind of got away from a lot of my own meetings there for a couple of months. And about the year mark in July, it's like, I don't think I'm where I want to be in recovery. And one of the biggest things that's been huge for me the last few months has been a morning routine. I call them my dailies. I get up and I go out on my back porch and I do some breath work, and that's when I pray and I meditate. And then that just starts my day off on the right foot. And that's made a huge difference. I'm trying to take care of myself physically better, eating better, trying to lose some weight. And
How do
I
you feel? I mean, back to God, and not religiously, but I know you were feeling agnostic. And how is your relationship now with your Creator? Where how has that progressed from? Yeah, I don't know. Prove that there's a God. Prove that you'd let your God and you'd still let innocent people die, and prove it, kind of thing.
it's evolving. I remember when I was in the ranch, when I was doing my step work there, I I thought I needed to get to step four, like, oh, step four, that's where you really dig into figuring out why you do what you do. And I
Mhm.
remember Dave Callister and Matt Piper both said when I got to step two, it's like, well, maybe slow down and take your time on step two and three and figure out what your higher power is again. And so I just started praying traditionally like I know how. And over the past year or so, it's I would say my concept of God is simplified in its own way. Like I don't know if it's a bearded man in the sky, or if it's an energy field that I'm praying to, but I pray
Mhm.
to a being, and I pray every day, and good things in my life are happening, and it's not things that I'm doing, so I attribute
Yeah.
that to God.
Yeah. One of my sponsors said, you just need to know there's a God and his name is an HR.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I can do that. So,
Yeah,
um,
when I was in residential, that they would take guys to church, they would take guys to one of the LDS wards, and then just a non-denominational Christian church up there in Sandy. And I started going to that, and these past few months, they put their service on YouTube, and I been into that every week, and more so, I like the music, and sometimes I listen to the message. But I don't think I would consider myself that religious. With my If my mom watches this, she'll probably cringe hearing that, but. That's just kind of where I'm at, but
well,
never
I
say
think it's
never,
a
I
it's a
guess.
it's a progression like everything else, and I don't think there's any end game to it, which is the exciting thing. Is there's that relationship. I can remember early on in the ranch, I was a newer member of the LDS church, and anybody that wanted a blessing, like I'd give them a blessing, and then I realized I was really doing people a disservice. That I was because what they were saying was worthy guy, whatever that means. Why don't you talk to him for me, and then let me know let me know what he has to say. And so I started talking to guys about that, and if they'd come in, I'd say, hey, just go down or up to your room, and you don't have to kneel, just go sit down and start talking to them. And because there's going to come a point in time when people get out of residential and they're in sober living, or they're at home, and the boss yelled at them, and the woman they weren't supposed to be dating for a year just dumped them, and they want to use, and they've called their sponsor, and they've called four people in the program, and nobody's answering their phone, and they're sitting there, and it's just you and God. And so that vertical relationship, whoever your creator is, I think is vital. And I think the big book talks about it pretty directly, that it can be whatever you want it to be. It can be a God of your understanding, but it has to be something greater than you. And the amount of peace we get, I get from turning my life over, early in the morning, my dailies, I take it back at 8. I give it back at 9:30, like it's a kind of a dance. But knowing I don't have to take the day on by myself, that my creator's with me, gives me a ton of peace. And so I'm glad you're on your journey, um, toward understanding that. And I believe the steps are a path to spirituality. I mean, for me, they get me back in relationship with myself and with others and with my God.
Yeah,
And I don't know any other thing that does that. Anyway, for guys like us,
yeah,
anyway. So
yeah. My sponsor, he'll always say, I know that he knows that I know, and that's just his way of,
yeah,
it doesn't matter what anybody else's belief is.
yeah,
I know I haven't felt like having a drink or use in quite a while, and I just attribute that to something outside of myself. And the big book talks about in Bill's story, he talks about his spiritual awakening, and there's other moments of that. But my sponsor had me read the appendix in the back of the big book about spiritual experience, and talks about how that's probably not the norm for most people, because
no,
I can't. Like I said, I had that experience in that fireside with feeling connected to God again, but I don't hear God talking to me. I don't know. I don't hear specific answers. My prayers are pretty simple. I show some gratitude and pray for others and pray for guidance and connection, and
yeah.
that's pretty much it. And that works for me right now. So
Yeah, and I think, um, it's called, they say in that appendix, I think it's the educational variety, that it's kind
Yeah.
of, we all learn kind of line upon line, that kind of saying, precept, and then we're given more, and then we learn more, and we're given more, and we've got to exercise faith and walk in the gray a little, and then we learn more, and then, but it's always, I think, a faith walk. And I think our creator, respects our ability to choose him or not. And I love that about my
Yeah.
God, that I'm not forced into loving him. I'm not forced into asking him. I'm not forced into a relationship with him. But my daughter is actually on an LDS mission, and I didn't think I joined the church when I was old. I was 36, 37. And about a month ago, she said, Dad, and this isn't like her. She doesn't talk this way normally. She said, I just want to run toward God because I know he's running toward me. And I just thought that was beautiful. And then I thought, well, how many times do I run away from God? And maybe I don't even need to run toward him. I just need to stop running away and turn around and maybe get a hug
Yeah.
and acknowledge and accept his help. But I love the concept that our creator loves us that much, that he's pursuing us, but we've got to say, okay, yeah, I'm in. Yeah, come on. And I love that about him too. So, well, dude, thank you for sharing your story. It sounds, I've kind of known you here and there, and I've known you a little bit being in St. George here and there, and I see you about an hour a month,
Yeah.
and I hear great things about you, and you've got a great spirit about you, and I know you're doing really good work at the ranch, and you're one of the right people to get that thing off the ground. And so thanks for the service you're providing them, and for being willing to share your story, with whoever's listening out there. I know you gave them some hope. And, what would you, in closing, like, what would you tell somebody in early recovery that's maybe struggling right now?
The one of the things that was told me early on, and you just mentioned the word dailies, is find something you do daily for yourself for your recovery on a daily basis. And for me, like I said, that's prayer, meditation, breath work. uh, for me, it's easy to reach out to another alcoholic because I'm around it all day, but the connection aspect that we learn at the ranch. But um, and when you're thinking about drinking, just replay the tape and look at where that got you. It's so incredible to be able to work with guys on a daily basis. That 6 months ago were literally living in the desert, and now they're rebuilding their lives. I just feel very blessed to be in the position I'm in, and be able to work in this field, and be reminded every day of what I don't want my life to be again, with some of the guys that struggle early on. And
Mm-hmm.
um, but I don't know if a stubborn, selfish guy like me can find some peace. I think anybody can.
Amen, buddy. Well, thank you for coming on, man. I appreciate it. And it was good to get to know you a little better and know your story a little better. And I don't know you real well, but I love you, and I
I
appreciate
love
all
you
you're
too.
doing. And thanks again, buddy. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. We'll see you
Okay.
next week, actually.
Oh, perfect.
Okay, take care.
Okay. Thank you. Have a
See
good
you.
night.
You too, buddy. Bye.